Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been defending his decision to expand his country's military operation in Gaza, which would include displacing about 1 million Palestinians living in and around Gaza City. Well, he's been speaking as the UN Security Council holds an emergency debate about the Israeli plan, which has already been condemned by a number of countries. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says the military campaign will not stop until Hamas is defeated.
The truth is that Hamas still has thousands of armed terrorists in Gaza. It vows to repeat the savagery of the October 7th massacre and to do so again and again and again. It openly professes its goal to destroy the state of Israel. It subjugates Gazans, it steals their foods, it shoots them when they try to move to safe zones. And I think it's instructive that now many Gazans are fighting back. They're begging us, they're begging the world, free us, and free Gaza from Hamas.
Well, the Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia and the Americas condemned the decision by Israel's government at the Security Council meeting.
If these plans are implemented, they will likely trigger another calamity in Gaza, reverberating across the region and causing further forced displacements, killings and destruction, compounding the unbearable suffering of the population. Last night, thousands of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv and cities across Israel to call for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. The UN has been unequivocal. The only way to stop the immense human suffering in Gaza is through a full, immediate, and permanent ceasefire.
A group of European countries also issued a warning ahead of that emergency UN Security Council meeting about Israel's plan to occupy Gaza City. Britain, France, Denmark, Greece and Slovenia warned it will worsen already catastrophic conditions in Gaza and do nothing to secure the return of hostages.
Children are dying from starvation. Hunger is so severe that desperate civilians are taking the risk of getting killed at aid distribution sites in order to feed their families. This is a man-made crisis, and therefore urgent action is needed to halt starvation and to surge aid into Gaza. We have a clear message for Israel. Lift restrictions on aid delivery.
Well, the United Kingdom's representative at the Security Council meeting says a diplomatic solution is possible, but both Israel and Hamas must step away from what he called the path of destruction.
This decision by the Israeli government will do nothing to secure the return of the hostages. Instead, it risks further endangering their lives. This escalation will only exacerbate an already catastrophic humanitarian crisis, uprooting 1 million more people and forcing them into dangerously overcrowded, unsanitary and undersupplied areas. In Gaza, children and babies are suffering from starvation. Hundreds of civilians have been killed trying to access basic food supplies. This inhumanity cannot be justified.
Well, with me is Jacob Evans, BBC World Service Middle East Regional Editor. Jacob, thanks very much for joining me. Let's go back to that press conference that Netanyahu led. What did you make of his tone?
Yeah, so this was announced just a few hours before he actually came out, and he had quite a defiant tone, actually. I was really trying to defend his plan, He stood up, it was quite rehearsed, he had pictures and graphics and things like that to show the audience. And he really defended it, saying that what this plan was the best way to end the war. And in his words, he said Hamas had not laid down its arms, and as a consequence, they were left with no other choice. He was very keen to put the blame on Hamas for a lot of the criticism taking place right now. The words at the back said, "Open your eyes to Hamas lies," and was very keen to place the blame on them, saying if there was a way of instituting starvation there, then far more people would be starving to death. He also said that all the problems with aid and stuff were Hamas's fault. And I think this was because since this was announced 2 days ago, there's been widespread condemnation both inside Israel and externally. So countries across the world have said that this is that they're not happy with this. And also inside Israel itself, there's been widespread protests across Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. And of course, earlier today, it was announced that the plans for widespread industrial strike action, which the leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, gave his backing to as well.
So what more did he say about his military plan?
So he reiterated the 5-point plan that was said before, and that is to the disarmament of Hamas, return all the hostages, demilitarise Gaza, override the security situation, and implement a new civil administration not run by Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority, which runs the occupied West Bank. And one thing he was keen to say was that one of the plans was to increase more aid. And that's been a huge sticking point, obviously. And he said there were 3 things for aid: to add more corridors, increase the distribution of aid by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and to increase aid drops. But of course, the role of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has come under massive condemnation as well. We've had reports of people being shot waiting for those crowds, and lots of mayhem when that happens. Similarly with the aid drops as well, we've had reports of people scrambling for aid, dying trying to get those airdrops, and even people being killed as the airdrops fall down. So these are all things which he was trying to outline and blame onto Hamas, and part of his plan he was trying to reiterate.
And he mentioned foreign journalists, and maybe the suggestion that more foreign journalists might be allowed into Gaza.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the things which has been a huge problem this entire war has been the war of misinformation and information. Because we can't have independent journalists into Gaza, we can't confirm and corroborate what's going on. And Mr. Netanyahu said that he was going to instruct his military to bring in foreign journalists into Gaza. But of course, on the back of IDF and with IDF, with the Israeli Defense Forces. And that, of course, means you don't have full freedom because you'll be navigated by where they take you. And of course, with what's happened with the media situation as well, there is, there's been reports of fake news and things going on like that. And he even said in the press conference that he wanted to look to sue the New York Times over degrees of famine. So getting international journalists in would be really good, because then we could be able to independently verify what things we've been seeing. Because at the time, we've been sort of relying on reports from the field and relying on freelancers and things like that. But yes, it'll be on the back of IDF forces.
OK, Jacob, thank you very much, Jacob Evans. Well, for more on this, we can go to Washington now, and our North America correspondent, Aruna Makaji. Aruna, hello to you. Let's just talk about initially that statement before that UN meeting and what was said from those European countries.
Well, it was significant that even as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was making a case and defending his plans of the military takeover of Gaza, along the same time, the UN began its meeting criticizing and essentially saying that this was not a good idea. You had that initial joint statement that came in, which focused on critical aspects, where they talked about how this war or this plan by Israel risks violating international law. It could further exacerbate the humanitarian catastrophe that is currently there in Gaza. They also urged Israel to reverse its decision, further adding pressure, and also said that there was an immediate need to lift restrictions when it comes to the distribution of aid by way of UN and affiliated agencies to be operating in that in the affected area. So that was the main message. Following that, we saw the session beginning with member nations then individually starting to make their case. And so far, it's been about an hour, and we've been hearing some very, very strong condemnation and criticism of Israel's takeover plan of Gaza so far.
And Aruna, very unusual that this would take place on a Sunday.
Well, this was an emergency meeting called by some of those countries like UK, France, Slovenia and Greece, where they asked for an emergency meeting on the back of that decision after the Israeli Security Cabinet cleared its decision to go ahead with its plans. So this was an emergency meeting that was called, which is where they're essentially now debating and discussing and putting forth their statements in an attempt to further try and rally support against Israel's plans and make that case based on the humanitarian conditions conditions. And another critical point that a lot of these countries have been going ahead and making is that, look, this is not going to achieve the peace that you're looking for, and this will further not just endanger the lives of Gazans there in the Strip who've already been suffering from worsening humanitarian conditions, but they also make the case that this is going to be detrimental to the safety of the remaining hostages there, and this is certainly not going to help secure their safe release. So they are making that case as well. We're waiting to see, there are still other nations we're waiting to hear from, including what the US would say, because their stance has been interesting with President Trump earlier last week, essentially saying that it is completely up to Israel. So it would be interesting to see how the US positions itself amidst this kind of widespread criticism and condemnation that we've seen coming out of the UN.
OK, Aruna, thank you very much. It's Aruna Makaji, our North America correspondent there.